All right, here we go. We're back. All right, when we last left off, we had created our console application. We named the application Hello World, and we had highlighted 3 different windows or views that we're going to use here. So the first of these views, again, was this text editor right here. So all of this that I'm highlighting right now, this is our text editor. That is where all the magic will happen. Over here, we have our Solution Explorer. Again, as I stated in the last video, this is where all the files that make up our application are held. And last but not least, some may say the most important, is our error list. This will show us any errors that we have in our code, any compile errors, meaning that these are errors that will not allow our code to execute. We also may have warnings there. And here in the main method, again, this is where we are going to start writing our code. Now is the time for you all to officially become software developers. Well, at least this is the first task that all new beginning software developers do. We are going to get Hello World to print to the console. Now to do that, C# has a built-in class. It is called console. So we're going to go ahead and start there. So type in capital C. Anytime you have a class, it always starts with a capital C. Well, capital letter. Now we notice here that as we start typing, Visual Studio starts to throw up a box and it gives us these suggestions. What it's trying to do is trying to predict or anticipate what we want to do here. Again, this is one of those tools, one of the benefits of using an IDE. This tool is helping us be more efficient and be more productive. At any point in time, if there's something else that you see there that you would want, you would use that suggestion. It gives you a little text, such as documentation, as we can see here, to let you know what's happening there. And as you get more familiar, this will make more sense. But for now, we know that we want that console. So we're just going to go ahead and press tab. And that completes it for us. Now you'll notice that some things in my Visual Studio may be a tad bit different than yours just because I have an extension that you may not have. But for the most part, everything is going to work very similarly. All right. So we have our class console. Now we want to look inside this console class to see what members or methods that we can use to write to the console. To access all the members inside the console class, we simply just need to hit the period, and this is called dot notation, key on our keyboard. And again, IntelliSense opens up and it gives us insight into that class, and gives us suggestions as to things that we may want to use. Now, these are all methods that we're going to use here. So what I want you to do is I want you to use your down arrow key once this pops up. And I want us to navigate through and notice all the different things that Visual Studio has given to us. And we want to look for something that looks like it can write to the console. So this first one that I land on is read line. Now this is going to read from the console, but we want it to write. And as we see here, we have 2 different methods for writing. We have just the write itself, and then we have the write line. Now there is a difference between the two. The write line is the one that we're going to use more often. And the write is the one that we're going to use in special circumstances. And I'll show you the difference between the two very shortly here. But for now, by default, we're just going to use write line. All right, so highlight write line. You can either click it, or once it's highlighted, you can go ahead and press tab. So I'll go ahead and tab. Now again, this behavior may be a little different. My Visual Studio with my extension gives me the parentheses and it gives me this little semicolon right here. What does that semicolon do? That semicolon lets Visual Studio know that I have completed this line of code. Everything that I'm going to put here is done. Technically, we're not done, but Visual Studio needs to have that semicolon in order to execute this line of code. Because if I take that semicolon away, we'll notice two things. The first thing we'll notice, we get this red squiggly line here. Anytime you see a red squiggly line, there is some sort of error happening. Now you will get this error or this red squiggly line as you type your code because it's not finished. Don't worry about it. But once you think you are done, and if you're still getting that red squiggly, there may be an error that you need to address. Now, how do we get more insight on what that error may be? We navigate down here to our error list. And as you see, our error list has populated with an X. It lets us know it's an error. It gives us a code. If you search for this code specifically in Google, you'll get some context. At this stage of your learning, this is going to be a little cryptic. If you click on it, it probably will take you nowhere. This description gives you some sort of description trying to describe. Again, this is just a prediction, and it's trying to describe what is going wrong. In this case, it's actually helpful. It tells you what project it's in. It tells you that it's in the Hello World project. It's in the program file, which is the file that we're currently in. And it even tells you a line number. And if we correlate this line number, we see that here is line 14 and the error is happening on 14. Now say we were here on 19, somewhere else in the code, and we had hundreds of lines of code here. And we're like, okay, where is this error at? Instead of having to find it, we could simply click on this error and it will take us to the point as to where it thinks the error is occurring. So in this case, it's expecting, again, that semicolon. So once we go ahead and put that semicolon there, the error's gone. Code looks good. Now we're almost there. What are we missing? Our goal here is to write a message to the console that says, hello world. So how do we do that? Inside of these parentheses is where our message is going to go. Now, in order for the console to know that this is text, we need to create a string. Now, we'll learn about strings later, but just know and note this for now, that anytime you are using a string or anytime you see a string, it will be denoted by 2 quotation marks. This means that it is a string, and the right line needs to take a string. All right. So inside of this, in the double quotes, we are going to write hello world. And if you want to put some flair on it, I like some flair, go ahead and put an exclamation mark, right? Because we want to exclaim, hello world, we did this. Now go ahead and take a moment. Look at that. Make sure there's no errors. Make sure there's no red squigglies. All right. Let's see this bad boy execute. Now, how do we get this program to run, to execute, to start up the application? Now, there are 2 ways. The first way is we can navigate up to this toolbar up here, and you'll see that there is a start. This start, don't click it yet, but this start will start the application. We could also hit the F5 key. Now, don't do it yet, but I'm going to show you something. When I hit start, we're expecting a black screen to show up. That is the console. And we are expecting for this message, just the hello world, without the quotations, to appear. But you'll see when I hit start, the screen quickly flashes that black box. Did you see it? And then it disappears. What's happening is the way Visual Studio and the way code is read is it's going to be read in order, line by line. So Visual Studio is going to come in here at line 1. It's going to hit all these things. It's going to get to this point. It's actually going to write out to the console our message. It's going to get beyond this, and there are no further instructions. So once there's no further instructions, it quickly does it, and then it blinks away. We want something that will allow the screen to stay up so that we can actually see our message. So what I want you to do, and we'll talk about this later, but for now, we're going to navigate back to that console dot read line. Don't forget your semicolon. And this is going to cause the console to wait for us, and it'll keep it up for us. All right? Okay, now we're ready. Go ahead and hit start or F5. And when you do, you should have Hello World on the console. Now take a moment, give yourselves a hand, stand up, celebrate if you need to. You have just created your first program. All right, good job. We still have more work to do, so let's continue. Go ahead and exit out of this. Now, I want to show you, before we end this video here, I want to show you the difference between write and write line. Now, the write line, what the write line does is it will create, it's almost as if you hit enter after you write this line, right? So you write hello world, it hits enter, and then it's ready to add a new line on the next line. With the write, it will just stay on that same line. So if I wrote another hello world, the write would stay on that same line. Just to illustrate that, you don't have to do this, not yet. Watch me, and then I'll give you time to do it yourself. I'm going to put another write line here, okay? This time I'm going to say, hello, developer. That's you. All right. Then I'm going to give myself some space, and I'm going to do this again, but this time I'm going to use just the write. So this one will say, hello world. And this one will say, no, we just want write. This one will say, hello developer. All right. So we see they look very similar. The only difference is the line, write versus write line. So now when I run this application, you'll see hello world is in a write line. So again, it writes to the console and it pretends to hit enter, and then it writes this one. This is another write line, writes this one, hits enter. And then we'll notice once we get to this guy, all of it's on the same line, because write will write it on the same line. Even though we put a space here, or we went to a different line here, it still is going to write it on the same line. So again, write line is what we will mostly use, but there are some circumstances when you want the things to be on the same line. When you want your string or your text to be on the same line, then we'll use write. All right, that's a lot. Go ahead and take time, write this out yourself, play with this a little bit, throw whatever message you want in there, and practice running the program. And then I'll see you very soon.